The roses arrived on a Thursday morning, wrapped in brown paper with no sender's card. I remember because Thursdays meant the schoolroom, where chalk dust settled on everything and made the spring sunlight look somehow heavier. I was kneeling beside Lady Sophronia's writing desk, correcting her French conjugations, when Mrs. Drummond appeared in the doorway with her face pinched tight. The expression I'd learned meant trouble was dressed in politeness. "Miss Ashmore," she said, holding the modest bouquet at arm's length as though it might bite. "These were left at the servants' entrance. For you. Specifically." Her emphasis on that last word carried warning, judgment, and a question I couldn't answer. I should have refused them immediately. Governesses don't receive gifts from unknown admirers. We exist in a careful space between servant and family, trusted with children but never quite trusted with anything else. We certainly don't create scandals that make the housekeeper's mouth go thin with disapproval. But they were beautiful, wild roses, the pink kind that grew along the estate's western border, and I hadn't received anything beautiful since Papa's death scattered our family like autumn leaves 3 years ago. "Thank you, Mrs. Drummond," I said, taking them carefully. They smelled like meadows and possibility. "Miss Ashmore has an admirer." 8-year-old Lady Sophronia squealed, abandoning her French entirely. How utterly romantic. Her younger brother, Lord Finlay, looked up from his mathematics with serious 6-year-old eyes. "Who would send you flowers, Miss Ashmore? Do you have a sweetheart?" "I'm certain it's a mistake," I said, though my hands trembled slightly as I found a vase. "Someone meant them for another household." But even as I spoke, I knew that wasn't true. They'd asked for me by name. Someone, somewhere, had thought to send Isolde Ashmore roses. The impossibility of it made my chest tight. The day proceeded normally after that. We conjugated French verbs, practiced penmanship, and read from the history primer about the Roman conquest. I tried to ignore the roses sitting on the window sill, their petals catching afternoon light. I tried not to wonder who had sent them, or why, or what it meant that someone had noticed me at all. That evening, during the children's supper, everything changed. The Duke of Harrogate wasn't supposed to return from London until Saturday. His parliamentary business typically kept him away for weeks at a time. But at 6:30, as I was helping Finlay cut his roasted chicken, the schoolroom door opened and Thaddeus Graymont walked in. I'd been governess at Graymont House for 18 months and had rarely seen the Duke outside of brief, formal encounters. He was a figure glimpsed in corridors, heard in distant rooms, present mainly through his children's longing for his attention. Now he stood in the doorway of the schoolroom, still in traveling clothes, dark hair slightly disheveled, and his gray eyes went immediately to the roses. "Papa." Sophronia launched herself at him with the enthusiasm he never quite seemed to know how to receive. "You're home early. Did you miss us terribly?" "Of course," he said, but he was staring at the flowers. "Where did those come from?" The temperature in the room dropped despite the fire. I stood slowly, setting down Finlay's fork with careful precision. "Miss Ashmore has an admirer, Papa," Sophronia announced happily, oblivious to the tension suddenly crackling through the air. "Roses came this morning with no card at all. It's wonderfully mysterious, like something from a novel." "Mysterious," the Duke repeated, his voice perfectly level in the way that meant he was furious about something. His eyes found mine across the room. "Indeed." Finlay, more perceptive than his sister, had gone quiet. "Papa, are you angry?" "Not at you, my boy." The Duke's expression softened slightly as he looked at his children. "But I need to speak with Miss Ashmore privately. Finish your supper, both of you, and Mrs. Drummond will come prepare you for bed." My stomach dropped. Private conversations with the Duke didn't happen. Not for governesses who wanted to keep their positions. "Miss Ashmore, my study." 1 hour. He didn't wait for acknowledgement, just turned and left, the door closing with terrible finality behind him. Sophronia looked at me with wide eyes. "Are you in trouble?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. I helped them finish their meal with hands that had started trembling again, kissed them both good night, and walked slowly down the servants' stairs toward whatever judgment awaited me. An hour later, I stood outside the Duke's study door. Through the heavy oak, I could hear him moving around inside, sharp, agitated movements that suggested barely controlled emotion. I'd spent 3 years learning to be invisible, to cause no trouble, to survive through competence and silence. And somehow, a handful of roses had made me visible in the most dangerous way possible. I knocked 3 times. "Enter, Miss Ashmore," came his voice, cold as winter stone. "And close the door behind you." The Duke's study was everything the schoolroom wasn't: masculine, imposing, filled with leather-bound books and maps that spoke of power and territory. A fire burned despite the mild spring evening, and hunting trophies lined the walls alongside portraits of stern-faced Greymont ancestors. This was a room that reminded visitors of their place in the hierarchy. I stood just inside the closed door, hands clasped to keep them steady. The Duke stood with his back to me, looking out the tall windows toward grounds I could barely see in the gathering dusk. In his formal dark coat and perfectly tied cravat, he looked every inch the aristocrat, untouchable, unreachable, and absolutely in control. "You summoned me, Your Grace." My voice came out steadier than I'd expected. "Small victories." He turned slowly, and I was struck by how different he looked up close. I'd seen him from across rooms, passing in corridors, but never like this, near enough to notice the sharp angles of his face, the gray eyes that assessed like weapons, the way he carried tension in his shoulders as though the weight of his responsibilities had physical form. "Who sent you those roses, Miss Ashmore?" Direct. No preamble, no politeness to soften the demand. "I don't know, Your Grace." I met his eyes because looking away would seem like guilt. They were left at the servant's entrance with no card, no indication of sender. "I've been trying to puzzle it out myself all day." "Don't lie to me." The accusation stung. "I'm not lying. I genuinely don't know who sent them. I have no admirers, no gentlemen acquaintances, no reason to expect such a gift." He studied me for a long moment, those sharp eyes cataloging details I couldn't begin to guess. "You've been in my household for 18 months. No complaints, no drama, no complications. Mrs. Drummond speaks highly of your competence. The children are fond of you. And yet someone thinks you're worth marking." Marking? The word confused me. "Governesses don't receive anonymous gifts without reason, Miss Ashmore. Either someone is courting you improperly, or someone wants to compromise you. Given the timing, I suspect the latter." My confusion must have shown because he sighed, moving to his desk where papers were spread across the mahogany surface. "Do you follow parliamentary proceedings?" "Not particularly, Your Grace." I stopped, uncertain how much ignorance was safe to admit. "There's a crucial vote next week. Railway investment through the southern routes. My proposal competes with the Earl of Stanton's proposal. The difference between them amounts to thousands of pounds and significant political influence." He looked at me directly. "Men like Stanton use any leverage they can find, including the women in their enemy's household." Understanding dawned, cold and complete. "You think someone sent the roses to compromise me? To create scandal in your household? I think someone is testing boundaries. The question is why now, and why you specifically?" I should have kept quiet, should have accepted his explanation and remained appropriately deferent. But the logic didn't hold. If someone wanted to compromise your household, wouldn't they target someone more visible? A lady's maid with access to your correspondence? A parlor maid who serves at dinner parties? Not a governess who barely leaves the schoolroom and has no connection to your political affairs? The Duke went very still. Then, unexpectedly, one corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile but suggested I'd surprised him. "You're more observant than I realized, Miss Ashmore." "I'm good at noticing things, Your Grace. It's how women like me survive in households like yours." "Women like you?" "Those of us with no family, no fortune, no options except to be useful and unobtrusive enough to keep our positions." The words came sharper than intended, 3 years of careful invisibility making me bold in ways I shouldn't be with a man who could dismiss me with a word. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with new attention. "You're right. If this were about political leverage, there are more strategic targets. Which means either my instincts about Stanton are wrong, or something else is happening that I don't yet understand. He moved to the window again, hands clasped behind his back. Here's what we're going to do. Saturday evening, I'm hosting a dinner party. MPs, local lords, potential railway investors. You'll attend. Your Grace, I'm not. As companion to Lady Vivian Caldwell, who's bringing her goddaughter. It provides legitimate reason for you to be present during the gathering. You want to use me as bait. The accusation escaped before I could stop it. He turned, meeting my eyes directly. I want to see who reacts to your presence. There's a difference. If someone sent those roses to create complications, they'll reveal themselves through attention or avoidance. Either way, I'll know. And if they sent them innocently? If some foolish man simply thought to court a governess? Then he'll learn that women in my household are protected, not available for casual pursuit. Something in his voice made my pulse quicken, possessiveness wrapped in duty. I could refuse. You could. But you won't. He said it with certainty that should have infuriated me but instead felt like recognition. Because you're curious now too. You want to know who sent them and why. And because refusing would create more questions than compliance. He was right, and we both knew it. Keep the roses, he said, dismissing me. Display them prominently in the schoolroom. Act normally with the children and staff. And report anything unusual directly to me, no one else. Not Mrs. Drummond, not Mr. Wickham. Only me. I nodded, understanding the implications. He didn't know who to trust either. Dismissed, Miss Ashmore. Then, as I reached the door, and Miss Ashmore. Be careful who you trust. That includes me. Lady Vivian Caldwell arrived Friday morning in a flurry of efficiency and expensive perfume. She swept into Greymont House as though she owned it, kissed the Duke on both cheeks with the familiarity of old friendship, and demanded to meet the governess who's caused such delightful chaos. I was summoned to the morning room to find her there, a handsome woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked dark hair, intelligent eyes, and the kind of confidence that came from being widowed young with enough money to not care what society thought. So you're Miss Ashmore. She circled me like a general inspecting troops. Let me see these infamous roses that have Thaddeus in such a state. They're in the schoolroom, my lady. Vivian, please. I detest formality among women. It's a tool men use to keep us properly distant from each other. She settled into a chair with elegant casualness. Now, sit. The Duke has asked me to prepare you for Saturday's dinner, but first I need to understand what's actually happening here. Over the next hour, Lady Vivian extracted the entire story with the skill of a practiced interrogator. The roses, the Duke's reaction, his suspicions about the Earl of Stanton's involvement. When I finished, she laughed, sharp and knowing. Men. They complicate everything with their political paranoia. Let me explain what's actually happening. She described the rivalry between Thaddeus and Stanton with clarity the Duke hadn't provided. Cornelius Blackwell has been sabotaging Thaddeus's alliances for months. The railway vote is simply the latest battlefield. Stanton represents the old guard, men who believe power comes from force and aggressive expansion. Your Duke believes in strategy, ethics, and modernization. They're fundamentally incompatible philosophies. He's not my Duke, I protested weakly. Vivian's smile turned sly. Keep telling yourself that, dear. But I've known Thaddeus since he was in short pants. He hasn't arranged elaborate dinner strategies around a servant's mysterious gift for casual reasons. Heat crept up my neck. He's protecting his household reputation. Is that what he told you? How convenient. She leaned forward conspiratorially. The Duke hasn't summoned anyone to private meetings since his wife died. He certainly hasn't assigned protective strategies to governesses. Either you're involved in genuine political intrigue, or he's reacting emotionally to something he doesn't want to admit. The implications hung between us, impossible and dangerous. Now, Vivian continued briskly, regardless of motivation, you need appropriate clothing. You can't attend as my goddaughter's companion in Governess grey wool. I don't have anything appropriate, my lady. My salary doesn't, which is why I've brought several dresses. My actual goddaughter has gotten absurdly tall and insists these no longer suit her. Waste not, want not. She produced a gown from tissue paper, blue silk with modest lace trim, nothing ostentatious but worlds beyond my worn-day dresses. I can't accept this. Nonsense. You can and will. Consider it armor for Saturday's battle. She stood decisively. Come. We'll see how it fits. An hour later, I stood before Vivian's mirror in the blue silk, barely recognizing my reflection. The color brought out my eyes. The cut emphasized a figure I'd forgotten I had beneath shapeless gray wool. My hair, usually scraped into a severe bun, had been softened by Vivian's made into something almost elegant. You're allowed to be beautiful, Isolde, Vivian said gently, using my given name for the first time. Being a governess doesn't mean you stop being a woman. I blinked rapidly against sudden tears. The last time someone had helped me dress for an occasion, it had been Mama, preparing me for my first, and only, ball before Papa died and everything fell apart. There now, Vivian said, squeezing my shoulder. Tears will ruin the effect. Save them for after Saturday when Thaddeus sees you and forgets how to form coherent sentences. That's not going to happen. We'll see. That evening, as I descended the main staircase for the first time since arriving 18 months ago, governesses use servant stairs, I felt transformation settle over me like the silk dress itself. This wasn't my world. These weren't my spaces. But for one night, I would inhabit them, and perhaps understand what it meant to be visible. The Duke stood in the entrance hall greeting early arrivals. He turned, saw me, and went completely still. For 3 heartbeats, he simply stared. His expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and something else, something that made my breath catch. Then Lord Cornelius Blackwell, Earl of Stanton, swept into the hall with loud authority, and the spell broke. The Duke's face smoothed into polite neutrality, the political creature reasserting itself. But I'd seen it, that moment of unguarded reaction. Whatever game we were playing, the rules had just changed. The dining room glittered with silver and crystal, 16 guests arranged according to strict protocol that put me near Vivian and far from the Duke. I was grateful for the distance, his eyes found mine too often across the table, and each glance made me forget my carefully practiced composure. Lord Cornelius Blackwell, Earl of Stanton, commanded attention at the Duke's right hand. He was older, perhaps 48, with the kind of aggressive confidence that filled rooms. When introduced to me as Lady Caldwell's young companion, his eyes raked over me with assessment that felt predatory. A governess, I understand. How charmingly enterprising of Harrogate to include you. The condescension dripped like honey laced with poison. Miss Ashmore has proven herself invaluable to my household, the Duke said coolly. I value competence over convention. Stanton's smile didn't reach his eyes. How modern of you. The dinner conversation turned political quickly. Stanton dominated discussion of the railway proposal with the kind of aggressive certainty that brooked no dissent. The southern routes require bold investment, not cautious deliberation, he declared, gesturing with his wine glass. Harrogate's proposal includes too many sentiment considerations. Worker protections, safety regulations. These things slow progress. They also prevent deaths, the Duke replied mildly. Collapsed tunnels tend to discourage future investment quite effectively. Light laughter rippled around the table, but Stanton's jaw tightened. Vivian, surprising everyone by speaking on business matters, added, sentiment also doesn't bury men alive, Lord Stanton. Perhaps both profit and conscience deserve consideration. The shocked silence that followed a woman offering political opinion made me realize how rare, and brave, Vivian's interjection was. After dinner, the men gathered around maps in the drawing room while women withdrew to polite conversation. But I lingered near the doorway, watching the railway route discussions with interest I couldn't quite hide. The elevation through Blackwood Valley is minimal, Stanton was saying, pointing to survey maps. Level terrain, easy construction, maximum efficiency. I frowned, studying the maps from my position. Something seemed wrong about those elevations. I'd grown up near Blackwood, Papa's parish had included those lands. The terrain wasn't level at all. "Vivian," I whispered, pulling her aside. "Those survey elevations are incorrect." She looked at me sharply. "You're certain?" "I walked those paths as a child. Blackwood Valley has significant hills, poor drainage. It floods terribly in winter." Vivian's eyes gleamed with strategic interest. She moved back toward the men, her voice cutting clearly across their discussion. "Gentlemen, Miss Ashmore has raised an interesting observation about the survey maps." Every head turned. I wanted to sink through the floor. The Duke's eyes found mine. "What observation, Miss Ashmore?" My mouth went dry. The survey shows level ground through Blackwood Valley, but Your Grace, I grew up near there. My father was vicar of Blackwood Parish. The terrain is actually quite hilly with unstable drainage. The surveys seem inaccurate." Stunned silence followed. The Duke examined the maps more closely, then gestured to his land surveyor. "Check these elevations against parish records." 5 minutes of consultation proved me correct. The surveys were falsified or incompetent. Either way, Stanton's proposed route would have been a disaster. A governess questioning professional surveyors. Stanton's face had gone red with fury. "This is absurd." "A governess who actually knows the terrain," the Duke corrected coldly. "Unlike your surveyors, apparently." The evening deteriorated from there. Stanton made his excuses early, departing with barely concealed rage. Other guests murmured among themselves, the governess who'd exposed railway fraud would be gossip for weeks. As guests departed, the Duke found me in the now quiet drawing room. "Are you all right?" I nodded, still shaken. I shouldn't have spoken. It was improper. It was brilliant. Those survey errors would have cost thousands in failed construction. He moved closer. "How did you notice what trained surveyors missed?" I paid attention. I remembered. I stopped, uncertain how to explain years of learning to observe everything because survival depended on noticing details others overlooked. "You've been hiding your intelligence," he said quietly. "Intelligence isn't valued in governesses, Your Grace. Obedience is. Not in my house. Not anymore." The moment stretched between us, charged with implications neither of us could voice. Then footsteps approached and we stepped apart hastily. But something had shifted tonight. I'd been seen, truly seen, as more than furniture with a pulse. The Duke had looked at me like I was valuable beyond my usefulness with his children. And Lord Stanton had looked at me like I'd made myself his enemy. As I returned to my governess quarters that night, I understood, the roses had been just the beginning. Whatever game was being played, I just moved from pawn to player. Whether I survived the promotion remained to be seen. Saturday morning found me back in the schoolroom, trying to pretend the previous evening hadn't happened. Sophie and Finley were full of questions I couldn't answer. "The servants say you embarrassed Lord Stanton terribly," Sophie announced with gleeful satisfaction. "Cook said he left in a fury." "That's not appropriate dinner conversation, sweetheart." "But it's true, isn't it?" Finley's serious eyes studied me. "You proved him wrong about the maps. Father was watching you the whole time. I saw through the stair banisters. Children noticed everything. Your father was concerned about the survey accuracy. That's all. He looked at you the way princes look at princesses in my storybooks," Sophie insisted with 8-year-old romantic certainty. Before I could formulate a response that wasn't a lie, Mr. Wickham appeared in the doorway. "Miss Ashmore, His Grace requests your presence in the estate office." Not the personal study, the business office. My stomach fluttered with something between anticipation and dread. The estate office was organized chaos, maps spread across every surface, land surveyors consulting documents, the Duke in his shirt sleeves directing operations with focused intensity. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "Miss Ashmore. Thank you for coming." He gestured to the maps. "I need your knowledge of the Blackwood region. The surveyors are correcting their errors, but your first-hand experience would be invaluable." For 2 hours, I helped identify accurate terrain features, drainage patterns, winter flood zones. It was exhilarating work, being treated as an expert consultant rather than dismissed as merely decorative. The Duke listened to every observation, asked intelligent questions, and consulted me as an equal partner in the analysis. Our hands brushed reaching for the same map. Both of us froze. The touch lasted only seconds before he pulled away, but electricity seemed to crackle in that brief contact. When the surveyors finally left, the Duke turned to me with unusual hesitancy. "Your insights today will save the railway project thousands of pounds and prevent construction disasters. I want to hire you as estate land consultant, in addition to your governess duties." I stared at him. "Your Grace, that's highly unconventional. So is having accurate information instead of fatal errors. I'll increase your salary by half." Half again my salary, money that could help Mama and my sister, that could provide security I'd never imagined possible. But suspicion tempered hope. "Is this because of my knowledge, or because you're still worried about Lord Stanton's schemes?" He met my eyes directly. "Both. Does the motivation matter if the work is genuine?" Before I could answer, I remembered something crucial. "I need to tell you about the roses. There's something you should know." His entire body tensed. "What about them?" "Lord Jasper Tennant confessed last night. After you'd retired, he found me in the library." I watched the Duke's jaw clench. "He sent them. Not as political manipulation, as courtship. He'd seen me walking with the children in the village, thought I was kind, and wanted to approach you properly for permission to court me. But he lost his nerve and sent them anonymously first." The Duke was silent for a long moment, processing. "So there was no political scheme. Just a nervous suitor. Does that disappoint you, Your Grace?" "It should relieve me. It eliminates a potential threat to household security." He turned away, staring at the corrected survey maps without seeing them. "But relief isn't what I feel." My heart hammered. "What do you feel?" "Something inappropriate for an employer to feel for his children's governess." The admission came quiet, almost reluctant. I stepped closer, emboldened by his honesty. "What if the feeling is mutual?" He turned sharply. Isolde, my given name on his lips sent heat through my chest. "You can't. The difference in our stations, the impropriety. I know the difference. I've lived every day knowing I'm beneath your notice. But you noticed anyway." His expression shifted through conflict, desire, restraint. "This is madness. Perhaps. But I'm tired of being invisible. You made me visible, Your Grace. You can't unmake that now." We stood close enough that I could see his pulse beating at his throat, could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. For one breathless moment, I thought he might kiss me. Then Mrs. Drummond's voice called from the corridor, and the spell shattered. The Duke stepped back immediately, composure sliding into place like armor. "Accept the consulting position. We'll discuss everything else when circumstances are less complicated." "When will that be?" "I don't know. But Isolde," he paused at the door, looked back. "Be careful. Stanton won't forget last night. Men like him don't forgive public embarrassment, especially not from women they consider beneath consideration." He left, and I stood alone among corrected maps and new possibilities, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake by admitting feelings I should have kept hidden. That afternoon, a letter arrived. Personal delivery, expensive paper, sealed with the Stanton crest. "Miss Ashmore. I would like to discuss opportunities that might benefit someone in your precarious position. Meet me at the old gamekeeper's cottage tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Discretion benefits us both. Stanton." It wasn't a request. It was a summons wrapped in courtesy, a threat disguised as opportunity. I should have shown it immediately to the Duke or Mr. Wickham. Should have refused and stayed safe within Greymont's walls. Instead, I found myself writing 2 letters that evening. One accepting Stanton's meeting. Another to Vivian, explaining what I was doing and to be opened only if I didn't return by 2 o'clock. Insurance. Evidence. And perhaps goodbye. Sunday morning dawned bright and mocking, beautiful weather for what might be a terrible decision. I attended church service with the household, Sophie clinging to my hand with unusual intensity. "You seem different today, Miss Ashmore," she whispered during the vicar's sermon. "Sad somehow. Are you leaving us?" "Never willingly, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand, hoping it wasn't a lie. After service, I told Mrs. Drummond I was walking to the village for ribbons. Half-truth, the gamekeeper's cottage sat on Greymont's far border, technically between estate and village. The walk took 30 minutes through spring meadows that should have been peaceful but felt ominous under the circumstances. The cottage appeared abandoned, windows dark, door hanging slightly ajar. Stanton's carriage waited nearby with a single servant, intimidation tactic, showing he'd come prepared. Stanton emerged before I could knock. "Miss Ashmore." How prompt. And brave, or foolish, I haven't decided which. I kept careful distance between us. "You said you had opportunities to discuss, Lord Stanton." He circled like a predator assessing prey. "You've become unexpectedly influential in Harrowgate's household. From invisible governess to trusted consultant in one dinner party. Quite the meteoric rise." I simply answered questions about terrain I knew. "Don't be modest. You humiliated me in front of MPs and investors." His voice carried cold rage beneath polite words. "That takes either exceptional courage or exceptional foolishness." I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was correcting inaccurate information. How noble. He stopped circling, faced me directly. "I'm offering you £300 annually to share information about Harrowgate's railway plans. Survey routes, investor names, timeline details. Simple information sharing. £300, more than double my governess salary. Life-changing money for someone with nothing. You want me to spy for you. I want you to secure your future before Harrowgate ruins himself with his soft approach to business. He'll fall, Miss Ashmore. When he does, everyone attached to him falls too. I'm offering you a lifeboat. Why would you think I have access to such information? Don't be coy." His smile turned predatory. "The Duke consults you now. Everyone saw it. You're in his private offices, reviewing his documents, earning his trust. You're either his mistress or his spy, either way, you know things I need." The accusation hit like a slap. "I'm neither." "Then you're wasting an opportunity. Think, girl. You're a governess with no family, no prospects, no security. Harrowgate will discard you when you're no longer novel and interesting. But I could provide permanent income, security, respect." When I hesitated, his tactics shifted. "Or perhaps you prefer I raise questions about your father's death." Everything went cold. "What about my father?" "Vicar Thomas Ashmore. Died suddenly 3 years ago. Debts no one could explain, unless those debts weren't his at all. Unless someone falsified records to destroy a family that knew inconvenient truths." His eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "I could investigate those records. Make public inquiries. Imagine the scandal when people learn the vicar's daughter is exactly what one might expect from such a corrupt family." He was lying. I knew Papa's debts were real, painfully real. But Stanton had influence to create doubt, to destroy my father's reputation and mine along with it. "You have no proof of anything. Neither do you. But I have power, and you have nothing. Think carefully about your choices, Miss Ashmore." Every instinct screamed at me to run, to accept, to do anything that would end this confrontation safely. Instead, I heard myself say, "No." "What?" "I won't spy for you, Lord Stanton. I won't betray the Duke's trust for money or threats or fabricated scandals about my father. His face flushed with rage. Then you're a fool. Harrogate will discard you like yesterday's trash. You think he sees you as anything but temporary convenience? You're a governess. You'll always be a governess. He'll marry someone of his rank and you'll be dismissed without reference. The word struck at my deepest fears, every anxiety I'd harbored about the Duke's attention being temporary, about being used and discarded. But I stood firm. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps I'll be dismissed and forgotten. But at least I'll keep my integrity. That's more than you can say, my lord. I turned to leave. His hand shot out, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. You'll regret this. Lord Stanton. A new voice, commanding and welcome. You're trespassing on Greymont lands. The Duke's gamekeeper emerged from the trees with 2 groundsmen. Stanton was forced to release me, fury and shock warring on his face. This isn't over, he hissed before stalking to his carriage. The gamekeeper escorted me back toward Greymont House, and I realized, someone had been watching over me. Vivian must have opened my letter early and sent protection. When I reached the main house, Vivian waited on the terrace, pale with relief. You reckless, brilliant idiot. She pulled me into a fierce hug. I opened your letter at 1 o'clock and sent the gamekeeper immediately. Did he hurt you? No. You saved me. I was shaking now, adrenaline crashing. Did they hear what was said? Every word. The groundsmen witnessed everything, and the gamekeeper has written testimony. She held up a small notebook. Evidence, my dear. Real, documented evidence of Stanton's attempted bribery and threats. Relief and delayed terror warred within me. I'd done something incredibly dangerous and somehow survived it. If you're enjoying Isolde's journey from invisible governess to brave heroine, don't keep this story to yourself, share it with someone who loves historical romance as much as you do. They deserve to feel these emotions too. Keep reading to see what happens when the Duke discovers what she risked for him. What if the Duke is angry that I went alone? Oh, he will be. Vivian's expression turned grim. Furious, actually. Because he cares about you more than is wise or proper. And speaking of which, he's riding back from London as we speak. Someone sent him urgent word about the incident. My heart sank. He wasn't supposed to return until Monday. Men who care about women do irrational things. Prepare yourself, dear. When he arrives, there will be consequences. The Duke arrived near midnight, his horse lathered from being ridden too hard. I was summoned to his study immediately, propriety forgotten in the urgency of his summons. He stood by the fire still in riding clothes, disheveled and furious and something else I couldn't quite name. When I entered, he turned with such intensity that I stopped just inside the door. Tell me, his voice came rough with emotion, tell me you're truly unharmed. Because if he hurt you, if he touched you, he stopped, pressed one hand against the mantel as though he needed physical support. I'm unharmed. Vivian sent the gamekeeper. Lord Stanton never had opportunity to. What possessed you to meet him alone? The explosion came sudden and fierce. Do you understand what could have happened? What he could have done to you in that isolated cottage with only his servant as witness? I needed evidence. You said Stanton was dangerous, that he was planning something. I had an opportunity to. Evidence isn't worth your safety. He crossed to me in 3 strides, gripped my shoulders. Not painful but firm, desperate. Do you understand what it felt like to receive word that you'd gone to meet my enemy alone? That you'd put yourself in danger while I was miles away and helpless to protect you? I'd never seen him like this, control shattered, emotion raw and unguarded. I'm sorry. I thought. You thought you could handle it. You thought your intelligence and courage would be enough. His hands gentled on my shoulders, but his eyes burned. You were right, this time. But Isolde, you cannot do this. You cannot risk yourself for me. Why not? The question burst out. You risk yourself constantly for your responsibilities, your duties, your political battles. Why can't I risk something for you? Because you matter. The confession tore from him. Because somewhere between roses and railway maps, you stopped being my employee and became someone I cannot bear to see in danger. Someone whose intelligence astounds me daily. Someone who, he stopped himself, jaw clenched. Someone you what? I needed to hear it, needed the truth more than safety. Someone I've fallen in love with. The admission came quiet but absolute. God help us both, but I love you. Your courage, your mind, your stubborn refusal to stay invisible when staying small would be safer. I love you, and it's madness, and completely inappropriate, and I don't care anymore. My breath caught. Thaddeus. He released me abruptly, ran his hand through his already disheveled hair. This is an abuse of power. You're in my household, under my authority. Any feeling I have compromises your position. What if the feeling is mutual? I stepped closer, emboldened by his confession. What if I've been falling in love with you since that first night in your study when you treated me like I had a mind worth consulting? Isolde, you can't. The difference in our stations. I know the difference. I've lived every day knowing I'm beneath your notice socially. But you noticed me anyway. You saw me when I was trying to be invisible. His control was fracturing. I could see it in the way his hands clenched, the way his eyes tracked my movement as I came closer. This will ruin you. Society will. Let society talk. I'm tired of being safe and invisible and half alive. I touched his face, feeling the rough stubble of his hurried journey. You made me visible. You made me feel real again. I won't apologize for loving you. Isolde, my name came like prayer and curse combined. Then he was kissing me, desperate, tender, full of suppressed longing finally unleashed. His hands cupped my face like I was precious and fragile and essential all at once. I kissed him back with 3 years of loneliness transforming into connection, invisibility becoming presence, fear becoming courage. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine. This is madness. Good madness or bad madness? Both. Definitely both. He laughed shakily. I'm falling in love with my children's governess. The scandal will be spectacular. I don't care about scandal. You should. It will follow you everywhere. People will assume I seduced you, that you're a social climber, that. Let them assume. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's enough. He pulled me close, wrapped me in his arms like he could shield me from the world's judgment through sheer will. We stood like that for long moments, hearts beating in sync, the future uncertain but shared. A knock shattered the moment. We sprang apart as Mr. Wickham entered with urgent news. Your Grace, the railway vote has been moved to Monday morning. Lord Stanton called an emergency session. The Duke's expression hardened instantly. He's forcing the issue before we can present full evidence of his survey fraud. You'll need to leave tonight to reach London in time. Thaddeus turned to me, caught between duty and desire. When I return, we need to discuss your future. Our future. Be careful, I said, not caring that Wickham was witnessing our familiarity. Stanton is desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. He touched my hand briefly, intimately, in front of his secretary. Wait for me. However this ends, wait for me. After he left, I stood trembling with joy and terror combined. We'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He loved me. I loved him. Everything was about to change. But first, he had to survive whatever trap Stanton was laying in Parliament. I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep knowing Thaddeus was riding into danger while I remained safe at Greymont. By dawn, I'd made my decision, reckless, possibly ruinous, but necessary. I left notes for Sophie and Finlay, words that made my heart ache. My darlings, I must go to London to help your father. If I don't return, know that you made my time at Greymont the happiest of my life. Be brave. Be kind. Be brilliant. All my love. The public coach left at 6. I spent nearly all my savings on the ticket, clutching my father's old parish maps, the only proof I had beyond testimony. 6 hours of travel gave me too much time to doubt, to fear, to imagine every way this could end badly. But I kept seeing Thaddeus's face when he confessed he loved me. Kept hearing Sophie and Finley asking if I'd leave them. This family had become mine. I'd protect it however I could. Westminster Palace loomed imposing and impossible. Guards initially refused entry to a common woman in a travel-stained dress, but Vivian appeared like Providence itself. "Thank God," she said, pulling me into the building through a side entrance. "I was hoping you'd have the courage. Come, we can watch from the public gallery." The parliamentary chamber buzzed with debate. Lord Stanton stood presenting his railway proposal with confidence born of assumed victory. Thaddeus sat stone-faced, clearly exhausted from the hurried journey. "The Duke of Harrogate's hesitancy will cost Britain economic dominance," Stanton declared. "My surveyors have certified this route's viability. We cannot let unfounded concerns delay progress." Thaddeus stood. "Lord Stanton's surveyors are either incompetent or complicit in fraud." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Formal accusations of fraud were serious business. "I have corrected surveys proving the Blackwood Valley route is structurally impossible without costs Lord Stanton hasn't budgeted." Thaddeus presented maps. "These corrections come from someone with actual knowledge of the terrain, someone whose integrity exceeds your entire operation's combined honesty." Stanton's face reddened. "Where did you obtain these corrected surveys? Who is this mysterious expert?" "Someone who lives by truth rather than manipulation." Vivian nudged me. "You need to speak. Now. I can't address Parliament. You're the only first-hand witness. Go." Terror and courage warred within me. Then I thought of Sophie and Finley, of the family I'd found, of the man who'd loved me enough to confess it despite every social barrier. I stood. "My lords." My voice shook but carried. "I can verify the Duke's surveys." Every head turned. The speaker demanded, "Who are you to interrupt these proceedings?" I straightened my spine. "Miss Isolde Ashmore, daughter of Vicar Thomas Ashmore of Blackwood Parish. I grew up walking the land in question. Lord Stanton's surveys are fraudulent." Chaos erupted. Women didn't address Parliament. Governesses certainly didn't accuse earls of fraud in formal session. But the speaker, intrigued, allowed me to continue. I was brought to the floor, unprecedented, and described the terrain with precision born of childhood memory. Produced my father's parish maps as corroborating evidence. Stanton's allies tried to discredit me, but I remained steady, unshakable. "I have nothing to gain from this testimony except truth," I concluded. "Lord Stanton offered me £300 to spy against the Duke. I refused. This isn't about railways or profit, it's about a man willing to lie and threaten to advance his interests while risking lives through falsified surveys." The vote came swiftly. Stanton's proposal, defeated. Thaddeus's proposal, passed overwhelmingly. I exited through crowds of shocked politicians and curious onlookers, exhausted and overwhelmed. Stanton intercepted me in the courtyard, fury making him reckless. "You've made a powerful enemy," he snarled. "You made yourself powerless by underestimating a governess." I was too tired for fear. He raised his hand to strike me. Thaddeus appeared, gripping Stanton's wrist with controlled violence. "Touch her, and I'll destroy you so thoroughly your grandchildren will feel the shame." Stanton backed down, fleeing with threats that rang hollow. Thaddeus and I faced each other in the crowded courtyard. Lords, MPs, gossips, all watching. "You should have stayed in Hampshire," he said, but his eyes held relief and love and exasperation combined. "You needed help. You risked everything. Not for you, for what's right." I smiled shakily. "Though yes, also for you." He took my hands publicly, "Scandal be damned. I'm going to create the greatest scandal of the season." "What are you?" He kissed me in front of everyone. Gasps, whispers, shock rippled through the crowd. When we broke apart, he said clearly enough for all to hear. I love you. I don't care who knows it. Marry me. I laughed through sudden tears. That's the least romantic proposal in history. Marry me, Isolde. Be my wife, my partner, the person I trust above all others. The children adore you. Society will disapprove strenuously. I don't care about any of it, do you? No. Joy exploded through my chest. Yes. I mean, yes, I'll marry you. No, I don't care about society. He kissed me again to applause from some onlookers and scandalized muttering from others. Vivian appeared, dry as ever. Well, subtlety is dead. Congratulations, Your Grace. Future Duchess. Shall we leave before the scandal sheets immortalize this in terrible verse? As we turned to go, a newspaper boy was already shouting, "Extra! Duke proposes to Governess at Parliament. Read all about it." Thaddeus just laughed, genuine and free. Let them talk. We have more important things to do. Like telling two children they're getting the mother they've been wishing for. 3 days later, we returned to Greymont House. Sophie and Finley waited on the front steps, propriety abandoned in their eagerness. You came back. Sophie launched herself at me. We thought you'd left forever. I knelt, gathering them both close. I promised I'd never leave willingly. I keep my promises. Are you really going to be our mama? Finley asked with 6-year-old seriousness. The servants are all talking. Thaddeus joined our embrace. If you'll have me as your new mama, yes. Will you still teach us French? Finley's priorities remained practical. Every single day. I laughed through happy tears. The household staff assembled in the servants' hall where Thaddeus formally announced our engagement. Reactions varied, some genuine happiness, some shock, but Mrs. Drummond stepped forward with unexpected warmth. Miss Ashmore, I misjudged you. You've shown more courage than most ladies of rank. It will be an honor to serve you as Duchess. Applause followed, and I realized, most of them had loved me already. They just needed permission to show it. Mr. Wickham revealed the household spy, a second footman desperate for money to pay his mother's medical expenses. Stanton had exploited that desperation ruthlessly. Thaddeus's justice proved merciful, dismissal without reference but payment for the mother's care. Desperation doesn't excuse betrayal, but I won't punish suffering. Leave my house, but your mother will be cared for. Witnessing his compassion, I loved him even more. 6 weeks of wedding preparation followed, a whirlwind of dressmakers, menu planning, and overwhelming social complexity. Vivian guided me through it all with humor and wisdom. My mother and sister arrived, tearful with joy and relief. Thaddeus settled an income on them immediately. They're family now. The wedding day arrived with spring sunshine and nervous joy. I wore simple elegance rather than ostentation, my choice, respected by Thaddeus completely. Sophie and Finley served as attendants, beaming with pride. Vivian gave me away, standing in for Papa. During vows, Thaddeus added, I promise to honor your mind as much as your heart. I added, I promise to remind you when strategy matters less than truth. Laughter rippled through guests, unconventional but genuine. The reception mixed supporters and curious society members. Lord Jasper Tennant attended, apologizing once more for the rose confusion. Without those roses, none of this would have happened, I told him graciously. I should thank you. I'll console myself with that thought. Be happy, Your Grace. Before we reach the ending, if this story touched your heart, if Isolde's journey from invisible to invaluable made you feel something real, don't let this be the last historical romance you experience. Hit subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Your future self will thank you when the next emotional journey arrives. Now, let's finish Isolde's story. That evening, after guests departed and children finally slept, Thaddeus found me on the terrace overlooking the rose garden. The same garden where mysterious flowers had once sat on the schoolroom window. "What are you thinking, Duchess?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against my back. That a year ago, I was terrified of being seen. Now I can't imagine being invisible again. Good. He kissed my temple. Because I plan to keep looking at you exactly like this for the rest of our lives. Like what? Like you're the most extraordinary thing I've ever had the good fortune to notice. I turned in his arms, meeting eyes that held love and promise and forever. The roses started all of this. Do you ever think about that? Every day. His smile was soft, genuine, the expression he reserved only for our private moments. Some anonymous flowers meant to court a governess, and they gave me everything I didn't know I needed. A scandal? I teased. A partner. A love. Someone who reminds me that the most important things in life can't be strategized, only chosen. I choose you, I whispered. Every day, I choose you. And I choose you. He kissed me under stars that had watched governesses and dukes for centuries, probably never expecting to witness love that crossed every barrier society built. From the nursery window above, I caught movement, Sophie's face pressed to the glass, watching us with romantic delight she thought we couldn't see. In a few years, she'd have her own love story. But tonight, this moment belonged to us. The roses that started everything were long gone. But what they'd grown, this family, this love, this life where I belonged exactly as I was, that would bloom forever. I was visible now. Not because someone granted permission, but because I'd chosen to be seen. And it was enough. It was everything. You just spent the last hour with Isolde, watching her transform from invisible to irreplaceable, from scared to strong, from nobody to the woman a duke couldn't live without. You felt every moment of her fear when those roses arrived. You held your breath during her confrontation with Stanton. You smiled when Thaddeus finally admitted he loved her. You cried happy tears at that terrace scene just now. So here's my question, why would you let this be the last time you feel something this real? You know those nights when you're exhausted from the real world and you just need to escape into a story that makes you feel again? That's what I create. Dukes who fall for the wrong women. Governesses who refuse to stay silent. Earls who lose control over maids they shouldn't notice. Love that breaks every rule society makes. Stories that make you laugh, cry, rage, and believe in happy endings again. So hit that subscribe button like Isolde chose courage over safety. Smash that notification bell like Thaddeus claimed her in front of all of Parliament. Because you deserve more nights like this, more stories that remind you what it feels like to be completely absorbed in someone else's happiness. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me, which moment broke you? The roses? The bribe refusal? The public proposal? The terrace ending? I read every single comment because you're not just viewers, you're the reason these stories exist. Your reactions, your emotions, your investment in these characters, that's what makes this worth doing. Isolde chose to be visible. She chose to be seen. She chose to matter. The next story is already waiting. Another duke. Another impossible love. Another woman who refuses to stay invisible. Click subscribe. Choose more stories that make you feel alive. See you in the next one.